Okay, the good news for those who are levels 1 to 3, you really don't need to watch any further videos of this series. It would be useful if you did, or even tried to create the programs yourself. That would be great. But basically, the things that are coming next are probably beyond level 3. I've still got to cover one or two things. We have covered some of this stuff, but not in detail. And on the screen now, you can see that I've got 4 things here: functions versus procedures, levels 4 to 6, validation techniques, levels 4 to 6, scope of variables should be known 4 to 6, more the level 6 than 4, and embedded SQL, which is sort of off the scale, 7 to 9 and beyond. So I want to cover those things because those will appear in your exam. I want you to have a good understanding of what they are. But rather than do them in isolation, I want to do them as part of the program to show you why they're used, where they're used, how they're used. That to me is probably a little bit more important. It's certainly helpful for the exam, but if you're going on to do computer science or anything to do with computers at further education, then it's essential that you really have a good understanding of it and see it applied, rather than it just be theory. So the way I'm going to be doing it is I'm not going to be writing any more pseudocode if I can avoid it. I don't want to take too much time up. I just want to write the program straight off and talk through it. So you may wish to use my code and write it, in which case I will leave links to the code so far. So in the previous video I did anagram10, so I'll put that on the site for you to download if you don't want to write it or you want to check your workout. And as I go through this, I'll be having anagram3, anagram4, anagram5 and so on, and I will put links on the site so that you can download and code those. Really what we've got to do to make this work, I mean, I could talk about functions versus procedures all day long in a sort of non-connected way, but we're going to create a menu system for our program. So in other words, we're going to put something nice on the screen, a welcome message, and give them a set of choices to do, and that's going to be run by a menu system. That's going to allow me to teach you about the differences between functions and procedures, because the menu itself is going to be a procedure, and the rest of the program that we've used have been functions. So I'll get the chance to discuss those two when we're there. Then we're going to have some sort of input for guessing the word. Obviously we're going to have a scrambled word, and we're going to put the scrambled word on the screen and say, what do you think this is an anagram of? And then the user has to guess what they think the original word was. And so they're going to be typing things in. But any time that we get our input into our program, either from a file or from a user, we need to check that they haven't been silly. So in other words, they haven't sent us a word, or they've sent us numbers, or maybe, I don't know, anything that they type in, we've got to check to make sure it's valid before we continue the program. If we don't, we're going to have to ask them to have another go at entering the word. So that's the validation techniques will be covered under the user input, and other things as well, particularly the filing system. Scope of variables we could really do sort of now, but I'm going to do a separate theory video on this to help you understand scope of variables. It's kind of strange to get your head around and difficult. We don't need to be in the program to do it, but if I did it straight off the bat like now, then you might be a little bit confused as to why we're playing around with the program. So when the program is virtually finished, then I'll come back to scope of variables, and I'll make a video and I will title it scope so you know that you need to look at it. We're also going to be sort of adding words to files. That again is going to come under functions and procedures. Adding a word to a file is going to be a procedure. So that as well as the menu, adding words to the file, it is just a straightforward procedure. And we'll understand why it's a procedure and not a function when we get to it. These two here, scoring and printing high scores. Scoring is pretty basic. Don't know how we're going to do it. Maybe if you get the word right, rather than just get 1 point, maybe you'll get a point for each letter. So we're going to count up the length of the word and give you that score as you go through. And you're going to keep playing the game until you get it wrong. But the point is that we need a couple of things for this. If we're going to save the scoring and manage the scoring, then we need to know the user's name or some sort of identification, maybe a gamer name or something. That needs to be saved so that we know who scored what. And we also need to save the scores. To do that, we're going to be using embedded SQL, embedded SQL, because it's a lot easier. If we didn't use embedded SQL, then we're going to have to use bubble sort and searching methods, which are just fine. We could do that. However, it would probably double the amount of lines of code in our program. And you're okay with bubble sort. They're going to be a separate sort of question in the exam, so we can focus just on bubble sort and insertion sort and merge sort and linear search and binary search when we need to, rather than have it as part of a program. I would much prefer you to see embedded SQL manage that. And the reason why I would use that is because the database itself is capable in one command of sorting things into order, either on the person's name or on their score. And it can give me just the top 5 high scores or the top 10 high scores, and really cuts down the amount of programming that we need. However, it is far more complicated. Well, I wouldn't say complicated to do, it's just complex in understanding. That's why it's at a higher level. So we'll be doing that when we are printing out or monitoring the high scores. This program is going to expand and grow, and that's the point of programs. You usually have a very early draft of a program, and then there's patches, bug fixes, improvements, and so on. A program really never ends. You just keep writing and writing and writing, and the majority of things you write are, for this, is just checking that somebody's done something correct, that they haven't messed your program up. We spend a lot of time, so I've got one line of code there, user input, guess the word. That's pretty easy, but I may have 15, 20 lines of code just to make sure they're doing that. So what I'm trying to say here is that the program will go on and on and on. You need to choose when you have seen enough to your level and just leave it alone if necessary, or just go to the last version and type that out. It's up to you completely. But once we've seen these, we've covered just about everything in the specification for the exam, and you'll have seen examples of it in a real application rather than just a theoretical version. So no more pseudocode if I can avoid it. I might just write things on a screen for you to see what I'm trying to do, but generally I'll just be working in Python from my head, and I'll be thinking in terms of these functions and procedures. I'll be trying to break down my program into small little bits of code, maybe 5 to 10 lines long, just to make it easier to maintain for the future. And I may even, if anybody's really interested in doing computer science, I may even what we call modularize it. In other words, put things in different Python files, turn things into a library so that you can see how libraries work. But again, that's up to you. If you have any problems or you want to ask questions, feel free to email me, ask questions. I would love that to happen. It very rarely does. It's difficult for me to know how well you're doing if you don't ask questions. I'm just assuming that you're okay with things. Please ask questions so that I can answer them, or give examples, or try to help you through the problems. That's up to you. So from now on, I'm going to be creating files. Levels 1 to 3 can happily ignore them. 4 to 6 can look at functions, validation and scope, and anything beyond that, for 7 to 9, have some fun with it. So it's up to you. So on to the coding.